Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. You're just in time for a new episode of Rock and Read. Today we will continue our journey through the book The Lives of Brian by AC/DC's longtime lead singer, Brian Johnson. We're on chapter 16. Here we go. Once my training was over, I got my very own transit van with an orange light on top, and I was told that I would be on call every other 2 nights. I also got my own walkie-talkie, and even better, my very own call signal, Whiskey Oscar 111. Not the coolest of call signs, I'll grant you that, and good luck saying it after a few beers, but I couldn't have cared less, because I absolutely loved my new job. It wasn't just that I was finally free of Red Bus and all the bull of the music industry, and it wasn't just relief that I was finally making a steady living. When I was out in my little van, I felt like I was performing an important service. In those days, you've got to remember, if your windscreen broke when you were driving down the A1, you couldn't just pick up your phone and call for help. You had to get out of the car and walk to the nearest emergency telephone. And if you were a long way between phones, or if it was dark and pissing it down, and as I may have already mentioned, it was often pissing it down, it could be a frightening, exhausting experience. You could end up freezing in winter if you weren't careful. And this being 1970s Britain, often the first phone you tried didn't even work, which meant you had to walk to the next one, then all the way back to your car. Needless to say, by the time my van pulled up, most people were over the moon to see me, and I got a great sense of pleasure watching a family of 4 and their little Austin Maxie toddle off after I'd got them back on the road again. I even started to think about going into business on my own. That's how much I had accepted the fact that this was going to be my life from now on. It wasn't that I'd given up on singing. I just convinced myself to treat it as a hobby now. Even if deep down, a part of me still burned to prove that I could do more and hold my own with the best of them. Like any job, of course, there were days when fitting windscreens could be a grind. It was hard, physical work for a start, and you'd find yourself coming home with bits of glass and glue in your hair and your hands sticky and black from handling the windscreen rubber. And sometimes the customers could be difficult, or just weird. One time I got called out at about 11:30 p.m. to a huge, articulated lorry with its front window out. This was at Scotch Corner, about 50 miles south of Newcastle, and of course it was lashing it down at the time, and there was a ferocious gale blowing. Now, the glass for a lorry is huge and extremely heavy, and the only way I could reach the opening was by standing on the roof of the van. I was terrified the wind would catch me or the glass, so I said to the driver, "Is there any way that you could hold one end while I get it into place?" He looked back at me, unscrewed the cap of his flask, poured himself a nice hot cup of tea, and went, "Not my job." That was a fun night. Then there was the time I got called out to a Ford Cortina in the middle of nowhere, only to find the driver sitting in the boot, drinking from a pile of miniature whiskey bottles, absolutely off his head. On closer inspection, both the front and the back windscreens were out. I got the fright of my life when I saw that mess. Whatever he had hit had gone in one end at such speed that it had come out the other. I had never seen that before. And he had all the booze in the boot because he was a whiskey salesman from Edinburgh who was dropping off samples at all the hotels along the A1. He was unintelligible. Bruh, bruh. He couldn't get the words out. Bruh. I thought he said bird. It must have been a big bugger. No, brick, he finally managed. Ah, that explained why it had gone straight through. No wonder the guy was paralytic. The brick had been trapped between the two rear tires of a truck he was behind, worked itself loose, then been thrown right through his car, missing his head by inches. Then I looked back at him, wondering how on earth he'd ever get himself in a fit enough state to drive the 100-odd miles back home. But those were different times. People did every day of their lives that you'd get locked up for today. But I had done my best for him, and he did give me 6 bottles of whiskey as a tip. By the time Margaret Thatcher became Britain's new Prime Minister in May 1979, I honestly don't think you could have found a faster, harder-working windscreen fitter in the entire country than yours truly. I had that job down to a fine art, and I was making money. In fact, if it hadn't been for what happened next, I might never have given it up. It was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the beginnings of what passed for rush hour in those days, when my walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Brian," said the dispatcher, "please, fast as you can, son. We've got a black Ford Cortina Mark IV just north of Scotch Corner. They're in an awful hurry." Now, a brand new Cortina Mark IV was a very nice ride in those days, and in black it would look the absolute business. So when I jumped into the van and sped off toward the A1, I already knew that this was going to be a higher class of customer. I wasn't wrong. From the moment I set eyes on the car, I could tell there'd be something different about this job. There were 2 guys in the back, one of them wearing a Panama hat with dark glasses. Another 2 guys were outside, leaning on the bonnet, smoking, both dressed in black. They just had this sense of freedom about them, like they didn't belong in the normal 9-to-5 world. It was something that I hadn't been around for a long time, something that I missed a lot. "What's your name?" asked one of the smokers in this very smooth, commanding voice. "Brian," I said. "Okay, Brian," he said. "Here's the situation. We've got a VIP in the back, and he's due on stage at Hammersmith Odeon at 9 p.m. tonight. It's 4:15 p.m. now, and it's a 5-hour drive to London. Maybe a bit less if we put our foot down." He pointed to the Cortina's smashed windscreen. "How quickly can you pop a new one of these in? There are 3,500 people relying on us to get to that venue on time." Holy, I thought. "Give me 15 minutes, I said. "Come on, son, realistically, how long?" 15 minutes. I worked so fast, it was like I was in a trance. I got the old windscreen out in 2 minutes, no problem. Then I dove into the cabin with the portable vacuum, resisting the urge to try and catch a glimpse of the VIP in the back. Then I ran back to the van, found the replacement glass, on went the new rubber. Then I wrapped the cord into the channel, carried the glass over to the car, placed it over the opening, bash, yank, bash, yank, bash, yank, until finally it locked into place over the lip. "Done," I said, sweat pouring down my face. "That wasn't 15 minutes, the guy said. It was more like 12. "What's the damage?" 25 pounds. He pulled out his wallet, took out 2 crisp 20s, and pushed them into my hand. "Keep the change," he said. Holy. Then he jumped into the driver's seat, fired up the engine, and began to pull away, just as I realized that I had forgotten to ask the VIP's name. But I found out anyway, because the car jerked to a halt as the rear window drew up alongside me. Down rolled the glass. Then out came a pale, hairy arm, holding up a t-shirt. "Here you go," a voice said in a Cockney accent that sent a shiver down my spine. The voice was unmistakable. At that time, it was being played all over the radio, at all hours of the day, all over the world. I couldn't believe it. I was being given a t-shirt personally by none other than Ian Dury, whose latest single, "Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick," was currently at #1 in the UK charts. I took the t-shirt dumbstruck while staring at my reflection in Dury's glasses. The window rolled back up. Then with a squeal of tires, the Cortina roared away in the direction of Hammersmith Odeon. I wish that was me, I thought. I looked down at the t-shirt, which was black with Ian Dury and the blockheads written on it in white, while trying to catch my breath. Every nerve ending in my body felt like it was on fire. It wasn't just that I had met a rock and roll star. Suddenly, I just knew that I could do it again, even in my 30s, even after trying and failing to make it once. The truth was, of course, it wasn't even really a choice. That energy, that sense of freedom, I belonged around it. It wasn't just a part of me, it was me. I had to find a way to get back in the game. Well, that wraps up chapter 16. Let me know what you thought of this chapter in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.